here, I think, week 3 of your current series, Before I Go, where we're listening to some of the last words that Jesus spoke and trying to figure out how they apply to our lives. And one of the ideas behind this is that Jesus is inviting us to do the impossible. Now, actually, it's more accurately the very difficult. This week, we're really going to be focusing in on the idea of trust. And I understand how hard trust is. And it is, sometimes it feels impossible to trust. But it's really just difficult. And with God's help, we can get across that line into trust. But I do recognize that sometimes there's barriers in our ability to trust. You know, I've told you guys before, I'm a dad of 3 daughters. And I remember when my middle daughter was in high school. Oh, you too? Oh, man, praying for you. How old are they? Okay, so you've already experienced some of this then. Yeah, you've already been there. So my middle daughter was in high school, and she was going through just a really dark time. And it really, I was actually worried for her. I was concerned for her. You know, she was just spending too much time alone and stuff like that. And just one night, it just kind of came to a head, and I pushed because I was so concerned. Maybe I pushed too far. She would say I did, and we were shouting at each other, and I may have put a hole in a bedroom door, may not have. But she's just like, Dad, you don't understand. And my response was, honey, I want to understand. Talk to me and help me understand. She says, you just can't understand. But I want to. Now, there were 2 things true in that moment among anything else in the world. One, I did want to. More than anything else, I wanted to understand what she was going through. I needed to know, just for my own sake, that she was going to be okay. So I needed to know what was going on, so I knew that she was going to be able to process this. What else was true was I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. I'd never been through anything like what she was going through. And even if I'd been through something similar, it wasn't the same. And so it took me years later to be able to look back on that and have a conversation with her and just say, you know what, you're right. There was no possible way in that moment I could understand what you were going through. But I did want to. More than anything, I wanted to understand. Now I've got grandkids, and I'm going through this with my oldest grandson. My oldest grandson is 6'3". He weighs 230 pounds, and he's 13 years old. Yeah, and he's like, and he, just like I did when I was his age, and probably like you as well, I just wanted to fit in. I wanted people to like me. And I would do things, and I would say things, and I would just do anything within my power to get people to like me. And he's just trying to get people to like him. He's like, Papa, you just don't understand. It's like, buddy, but I want to. I understand. I'm a little bit wiser now, and I recognize you're right. I cannot understand. I do not understand. You're 6'3", 230. When I took my freshman physical, I was 4'9" and 75 pounds. Okay, so you're right. I don't understand exactly what you're going through, but I do remember what it was like for people to look at you differently and say things about you because you were an easy target. I was an easy target because I was this tall. He's an easy target because he's that tall. He's never played on a sports team that he's not the biggest kid on, kind of stuff. I never played on a sports team that I wasn't the smallest kid on. So I get it. I don't understand, but I wanted to, and I could relate. And so when we look at Luke chapter 22, verses 39 through 44 tonight, we have to recognize that Jesus did something by coming to earth so that he could relate. And yet, there are many times in our lives when we would say to him, but you just don't understand. And at some level, that's true. But what also is true is that he wants to understand. He wants to earn your trust. And so just recognizing what's going on. Now, anytime we have an issue where there's a break in trust or a lack of trust, one of the things that will help us sometimes to process through this is an awareness that there are multiple realities going on. Okay? And think about any kind of situation in your life right now that's trying, that's testing, that where if there was trust, it would be a lot more helpful for you, but it just is hard to find. So think about any situation in your life. Here's what's going on right now. You have a reality. You have a reality. And it's your reality. No one else has that reality. It's yours. But there are other people that you're interacting with. They also have a reality. And human nature tells us that we're going to make the assumption that everyone should see things the same way that I see them. And the reality is they don't. You've got your reality in this situation. I've got my reality. I make assumptions about your reality. You make assumptions about mine. But here's what's also true. In that realm, that murkiness of these multiple realities, there is truth. And if the closer we can get to truth, the easier it is for us to get past whatever it is we're struggling with in our life right now. And especially when you think about your relationship with God. I don't know where you are in your relationship with God. You know, I would like to tell you that at some point in time you're going to get this whole thing with God figured out. I'm older than dirt, and I'm still working on it. Okay, there are just times that in my relationship with God, it's like, man, it ought to be easier. After this amount of time, I ought to have it all figured out, and I just don't. But what I have learned that there are times when I don't have it figured out, I trust who He is, because I know He's got it figured out. Now in Luke chapter 22, there's just a lot in that chapter, and it's important kind of context for us. You know, in Luke chapter 2, they're getting together to take the Passover, to have a meal together. That was a part of the Jewish holidays and traditions, what was called the Feast of the Unleavened. Prior to that happening, Jesus was sold out by one of his closest companions to the Jewish leaders. They took the Lord's Supper, they took that Jewish meal, and Jesus reframed it into what we know today as the Lord's Supper when we take communion with the bread and the juice. Jesus talks about his impending betrayal that's coming just around the corner, and they're asking, who is it? Is it me? Is it him? Is it them? There's a question around the table about who's the greatest. Always going to be that conversation. Anytime you get multiple people in the room, somebody wants to be better than somebody else. Wasn't any different with, all these adult guys sitting around the table with Jesus. They all wanted to know who's the best, who's going to be the greatest. You have Peter's ironic declaration about his willingness to go to prison or even death with Jesus. And then Jesus saying, man, Peter, you know what? Before the sun's up tomorrow, you're going to deny me 3 times. Before the sun rises, you're going to deny me. It's all bravado right now, but when it really comes to that moment, you are going to deny me. And then he talks to them about preparing for what's coming. To get to this place of there's something coming. And there's this sense of angst, anxiety that takes place, and they even get to talking about, hey, we got 2 swords. Is that going to be enough? And Jesus is like, it's fine. Because the reality is they didn't understand exactly what he was saying to them. Because he's able to peek around the corner. Again, Peter had a reality. John had a reality. But there was truth. And Jesus understood what it was. So let's look at Luke chapter 22, verses 39 through 44. And I'm going to be reading from the New American Standard. It might come up on the screen different. I don't remember what the slides say at this point in time. But verse 39 and following, he says, he came out and proceeded, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he arrived at that place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw. He knelt down and he began to pray, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. Now an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in agony, he was praying fervently, and sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. Now, just to kind of summarize what happened here, something that we can use in our life and in our journey. Jesus told his disciple in a moment where there is unknown all around us, there's nothing more important for you to do than pray. Now, sometimes it's not intuitive for us to pray. Sometimes we've had experiences where we prayed and we didn't like or we didn't get the answer we were looking for. But Jesus is telling us here that in those circumstances of uncertainty, there's nothing more important than you pray. And then he went off and said, you pray and I'll pray. You be praying here. He didn't tell them to pray for him. He told them to pray because you're going to be tempted. I'll pray. You pray. But then when he prays, he goes before the Father, knowing what was going to happen to him. And he's like, God, take this cup away from me. He knew exactly what was coming. He says, Father, if there's any possible way, take this away from me. You know, and we get that place where he was asking God to remove this cup. We understand that he says, not my will, but yours be done. And then we hear there that he was just overwhelmed by the pressure of it. Anybody here ever felt overwhelmed by the pressure of life? Okay? Now, I'm assuming every person in here has had their hand up, can identify. You know, again, man, it would be great that all of a sudden we reach a certain point in life and that's no longer true, but it's not. You know, we go from high school to college or work. We go from college and that work to a career. We get families, possibly. We have children. Then we have to deal with it. You know, that whole idea of, you know, I heard somebody was talking about, you know, when did the devil fall? Anybody know how old the devil was when he fell from grace? Some have suggested he was about 15. Okay? Because that's about the time the kids in my life looked at me and denied my existence, you know, kind of stuff. So, you know, I don't know exactly what that is, but recognizing that's going on, that there are these struggles, these tensions in our life. But God has an invite for us, an invite to be a part of what he's doing, but it requires that we trust him. It requires that we trust him. Now, it's important that we entrust others. We need to have friends around us that we can trust, friends that believe the same things that we do, friends that are on a similar journey to ours that we can have trust with. It's important, believe it or not, that we trust our parents. Because here's what's true. They may not understand, but they care for you more than you could ever imagine. Okay? I get it. They may not understand. They may want to with all their hearts, but they may be unable to, but they care. And you have to trust that the care is as important right now as anything else. They don't have to understand. You just have to know that they care, and they always will. You know, my girls, you know, they know, you know, my oldest daughter turns 40 this year. You know, she turns 40 this year. She calls and she says the word daddy, and I'm attentive. You know, now they only call me daddy when they want something or need something, even at this day and age. I saw some girls smirking over here. They know that's true. You know, dad's a jerk until you need something, and then he's daddy all of a sudden. And I get that. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change. I don't know if there'll ever be a time in my life that one of my girls would call me daddy, and I wouldn't be fully attentive. But that's the same way our Father in heaven is. You know, Jesus called out to him, Abba, Father, Daddy. And anytime we call out to him with that kind of sincerity, with that kind of interest, he will always listen, but we have to trust that. Now, I want to ask you, what are your feelings about God right here tonight? This is rhetorical. I don't need anybody to say anything out loud, okay? What are your feelings about God right now? Just think about it. Do you trust him? Do you trust God right now with your life, with your future, with your dreams? If you don't, why? Why? What's happened? What's happened to you? What's happened in your relationship? What's happened in your journey that you don't trust God? And then the next question is, are your views of God fair? Are they accurate? You know, because remember, you have a reality. He has a reality. It just happens in his case that his reality is also truth. And so recognizing that fact that when God and I are at odds, that's the easy one, because when God and I are at odds, who's in the wrong? That's not rhetorical. Who's in the wrong? Me, yeah. He's perfect. He's flawless. He cares about me. So when our relationship is broken, I'm the one who's not getting things right. Now you're dealing with your friends. There's always that issue out there of who's right, who's wrong, who's mostly right, who's mostly wrong. The same thing with your parents as they try to understand what you're going through, kind of stuff, that there is their reality, there's your reality, and then there's truth. But with God, he knows the truth. And one of the things we have to wrestle with is the impact of our feelings upon our journey. That's your emotions. That's those internal things. They happen. You all know what it feels like when your feelings and your emotions have reared up. You get that tension. You may get it here, you may get it here, you may get a headache, whatever the case may be. But you have these feelings, but you need to become aware of the why. You need to spend some time with your emotions. You need to spend some time with your feelings and to find out what are the fears, what are the insecurities that are keeping me from being in a trust relationship with my friends, with my parents, and most importantly, with God. And then one of the things you have to do is get all this stuff out of your head and get it on paper. Now, this is a really helpful insight. You get stuff out of your head and onto paper, because once you write it down, it becomes concrete. And then you can look at it and say, do I really feel that way? Is that really what I'm thinking? Because up here, it seems so clear. But one of the things I've learned is that most of the time, anything I keep up here is never really as clear as I think it is. Have you ever tried to explain to somebody something that you thought was incredibly clear in your head, and all of a sudden as the words came out, it's like, well, you know what I mean. No, you don't even know what you mean. How could they know what you mean? Because it's just been up here, and it's just been this jumbled mess of you wrestling with your fears and your insecurities, and you never really took the time to take it apart, take it out, look at it, put it on paper and process it. Write it down. This is exactly what I'm feeling. Because now it's clear. Once you can write it down and write it out, then you can say, this is exactly how I'm feeling, to your best friend, to your boyfriend, to your girlfriend, to your parents, to your God. This is what I'm feeling. I want to read a poem for you. Okay, I want to read a poem. It's called The Difference. And this is one of those poems that you'll find, and there's half a dozen people that have been given credit for writing it. So I'm not going to give anybody credit. I'll just let you know that it wasn't me. Okay, that's all you really need to know, is it wasn't me. And it's called The Difference. And I'm just going to read part of it. In this poem, The Difference, it said, I got up early one morning and I rushed right into the day. I had so much to accomplish that I didn't have time to pray. Problems just tumbled about me, and heavier came each task. Why doesn't God help me? I wondered. And he answered, you didn't ask. And then it goes on, it says, I wanted to see joy and beauty, but the day toiled on, gray and bleak. I wondered why God didn't show me. He said, but you didn't seek. I tried to come into God's presence. I used all my keys at the lock. God gently and lovingly chided, my child, you didn't knock. One of the things that we have to do is get to this place that we're willing to trust God, because friends will come and go. Okay, friends are going to go off to college or whatever the case may be. Lives go different directions and friends go different directions and stuff like that. Sometimes even with our family, very tight relationships aren't so tight later on. We develop new relationship with friends, with spouses, whatever the case may be. We move to new towns and stuff like that. But the one thing that never changes is God. He's always there. Even when you forgot him, he's never forgotten you. Even when you feel like you've gone too far, you have not. He's right there. And so getting to that place of recognizing that, thinking back to Jesus in Luke chapter 22, He knew what the day was going to bring. He knew how he was going to be treated. He knew how his friends were going to treat him. He knew how his family was going to respond. He knew how the leaders were going to respond. He knew how the people around him were going to respond. And his response was, you pray, I'll pray. God, in your hands. If it's possible, take this away, because that's what I'm feeling right now. There's nothing about me that wants to go through this. If it's possible, take it away. But if not, your will be done. Because that's what trust is about. It's about trusting God with all things. You know, several years ago, my wife and I went to the hospital to deliver our son. And within a few minutes of Gloria giving birth, we found out that our son was not perfectly healthy. And we had this time to pray. It's like, God, nothing I want more than you to make this little boy well. But not my will, but yours be done. And his will was that Luke did not survive. But I trust him. He's been faithful. Even when I haven't been, God has been faithful. So as you move into the next season of your life, whatever it looks like, man, I wish the best for you. I want the best for you as a parent. You know, I want every one of you to be healthy. I want every one of you to be happy. I want every one of you to succeed. But more than anything else, I want you to know that God's faithful. You can trust him in any circumstance, in any situation. So I think there's some questions up there that you can go into your small group. What in your life are you currently struggling to trust God with? What's that thing that's just right there? What would it look like for you to be completely honest with God about your feelings? Sometimes it takes being completely honest with others first before we can be honest with God. And then finally, what would you like to ask him to do? I don't know what your situations are. I don't know where you are in your life's journey. But I know that God's looking at you right now. And as Josh said, you're a son of the Most High King. You are a daughter of the Most High King. And he loves you.